not with, so we are live. All right. Well, like I said, we'll give it a few minutes and let people arrive, and then we'll crack straight on. Did everyone have a nice day today?
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it was fun.
Had to fight the Northern Line, which was doing its usual crap in London. Yeah. For anybody that has ever played that game before,
I played that. Luckily, I've never worked directly in London, but I've been in there plenty of times, obviously, and it's definitely a game to play, isn't it? So it's nice that it wasn't too stressful. There was a few strikes a little while ago, wasn't it? Wasn't it quite manic?
It's points failure this time around, but yeah, who knows what the previous challenges were.
There's always something going on, isn't there? There's always something.
It's never boring.
It's never boring, is it, mate? Never boring. Not on the underground, anyway. Right, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack straight on. We'll wait a couple of minutes, so let's get on and people join. They'll pick us up where we are. So welcome, everyone, to tonight's Nexus Fertility panel, named Finding the Right Words, a men's panel sharing your fertility journey. Now, before we get started formally with the panel, I'll just do a quick disclaimer. So Nexus Fertility events are never designed to replace professional support and help. So if you want further information or support with anything discussed today, please talk to your doctor, your consultant, your clinic, your therapist, whoever you need that support from. So let's get on with the panel. So today's panel is talking about a subject that I experienced quite, I say significantly. It was quite an important element of my fertility journey, and that was discussing what we were going through with other people. We did it differently with each cycle, but the experiences I had changed how we approach things, and that's why I felt it was really important that we put on this panel and discussed with guys that are going through it, have been through it, so we can have that holistic conversation on different experiences. So we're joined by three amazing guys today: Alistair, Luke, and Sol. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves, get a little bit of a brief background, and then we'll go straight into the panel itself. So let's start with Alistair. If you could just give us a brief background for anyone that doesn't know you, what brought you to the panel today.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Alistair. I struggled with male factor infertility back in discovered it in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, kind of going through IVF. My wife and I had 7 rounds of IVF with ICSI. They were all failures. We had 2 miscarriages in that time. And it kind of led me down a rabbit hole of kind of looking into my condition myself. I had a PhD in science, so I looked into it and discovered what I could be doing differently in terms of lifestyle changes and pursuing kind of varicocele repairs. Kind of down in London for me coming down from Glasgow was a bit of an effort, but yeah, I went to go see Mr. Ramsey, got varicocele embolized, had a consultation with Melanie Brown, the nutritionist, did some quite big lifestyle changes, and those 2 things alone changed my sperm count from kind of 100,000 or so concentration up to about 7 or 8 million, and kind of went on from 7 failed rounds of IVF to 2 natural conceptions, or actually 3 natural conceptions. We did have another miscarriage at one point, and then 2 successful pregnancies. So I've got two young girls now, which is wonderful. So yeah, big, long, intense journey of 7 rounds, and here I am with kids, and I wanted to kind of share my story and my experience. Reached out to Kieran this year to talk about it, and trying to make more of a presence in the space now.
Cheers, buddy. We really appreciate everything you're doing. And obviously you were our last, I should say, guest on series 4 of the podcast. So if anyone wants to know a bit more about Alistair's story, go to the Male Fertility podcast. He's on there. So it was a great discussion, wasn't it, buddy? Luke, if you could give us a little bit of background, what brought you to the panel today?
Yeah, thanks. I feel like the baby compared to Alistair. We've had 2 rounds of IVF also with ICSI, and yeah, we've had a couple of implants that have sort of indicated that they were positive at 2 weeks, and then didn't go any further than that. Between the first and the second, I, how should we put this, reminded the clinic that they'd done a whole load of scans of my bollocks and all sorts of other tests, like before we even started, and said, did anything come of those? And it was only when I reminded them and asked to see the kind of results, they said, oh yeah, there's a big varicocele. To be fair, they quite quickly then managed to somehow Q-jump me and get that embolized. I think that was about December last year. Similarly, made some lifestyle changes. I do a lot of cycling, so look to kind of manage that. Most of the other things, to be honest, I eat and drink quite healthily, and the other things. But yeah, the cycling was the kind of big change for me. Had a second round of IVF and ICSI March, April last year, which was again not successful. So just took a bit of a pause after that. I think my wife was probably quite keen to just go again. And I was like, well, actually, we had 2 failed rounds. Let's at least try and understand what's going on. Managed to get an appointment with Professor Ramsey, as lots of people do, currently, and was diagnosed with double-strand DNA breakage. Got that diagnosis about 2-3 weeks ago. So just looking at what we can do around Zymot and what I can do to sort of boost the motility before we do the Zymot, probably either just before or just after Christmas. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm very, very much in the midst of everything at the moment. But yeah, I think keen to sort of share some views. I mean, I think finding the right words might be too ambitious, but finding some words and to sort of share what it's been like for me and talking to friends and family.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I really appreciate you're in the mix of it, and as you said, it can be an extremely difficult place to be, but we appreciate you being here tonight, mate. So looking forward to the discussion with you. So my friend, give us a little bit of background about you, mate.
Well, but basically in 2019, I went to Watford to have my balls looked at, and on the NHS, and they said, yeah, you've got a varicocele. So we tried a couple, basically 4 or 5 times. We had IVF. They chucked me on the IVF ladder. Nothing, unfortunately. Then in 2024, I had my varicocele done through Golden Balls, as I call him, Mr. Ramsey. And then in September last year, my balls had gone back to normal, I call it, and my sperm had tripled. And as we're talking now, my wife, we're on the process of doing a frozen transfer. My wife is doing injections now as I talk to you now. So that's basically my story, and I just want to get more people talking about fertility, and it's not talked enough, as we all know.
No, yeah. Once again, mate, we're really thankful for you being here. And before the other guys joined, your wife came on and explained that she was about to do her injection. So appreciate you are literally in the moment right now. So thank you so much, all 3 of you, for being here. Really, really appreciate it. So let's start with Alistair. What I would like to know, Alistair, is at what point did you start sharing your story, or sharing your news and your journey with your family? I guess that was the first port of call for you.
Yeah, family was first. So yeah, for me it was fairly quick with my family. My dad was he's retired now. He wasn't gynae consultant through his career, and he never worked in the fertility space. He always worked in a different area of the specialty and kind of cancer stuff like that. So when I found out, I kind of called him quite quickly, because I knew I didn't really have to worry about that kind of emotional impact of, like, although I felt this massive, huge sort of psychological impact, that sense of like kind of loss of manhood that a lot of kind of men feel. And you didn't really have to worry about that with my dad, because he'll have seen it over and over again in his career, and there will have been women in his care with cancer that have lost their fertility through their diseases, and he will of course not think any less of them and any less of me. So I knew quite quickly I could speak to him quite easily. So I did phone my dad quite quickly. I guess I was quite fortunate in that sense that I can imagine that that's not an easy conversation for a lot of other men, depending on their relationships. And I kind of let my dad kind of manage everybody else for me, kind of tell my mom and tell my brother and sister, so that I didn't have to. But of course, having told him and that my family knowing, Julia felt she had to tell her family, which I wasn't quite as keen on, but of course, fair's fair. So I guess our families knew quite quickly, and telling Julia's family was mostly about managing them, managing their expectations, and trying to not have them constantly ask, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? It's just a conversation you could really do without, especially from our siblings. But yeah, family first. And that was mixed, I think. It was an okay conversation between my dad and I. And then I think it was kind of important to have the conversation with the family first, so that they kind of back off with that kind of constant expectation and that constant kind of wanting an update when they're getting grandchildren or nieces and nephews or whatever they're expecting. So I think that's the way it went for me. Friends work was more difficult, but we'll come to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will, because I think it is almost another level, isn't it? When you, for me, certainly was going outside the family. You said something really interesting there, and that was managing other people's expectations. Because at the time, like, you don't know what the expectations are, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. It must have been really supportive to have your dad, like, to help do that for you, even if he's done it naturally in a father instinct. How did the wife's family initially react then? If it was a concern of yours, did you get the same response from any of theirs, as understanding as your dad?
So, I mean, to circle back to my dad, my dad and I get on, but I wouldn't normally go to him for like emotional support stuff. It's not the route I would normally take. Pretty much went to him quickly because of his kind of clinical background, and I knew he would take a kind of clinical, scientific point of view on it, and that's kind of what I needed at the time, was somebody to take the emotion out of it, so I could talk about it in a totally clinical way, even though that wasn't how I was feeling. But I didn't want to kind of talk about my emotions at that time. And although he has been emotionally supportive over the years, he wouldn't be my primary person to go to for that sort of stuff. Telling Julia's family was, I think the men in our family were better than the women. Our brother and our dad were kind of okay. They kind of backed off, realized it was quite a tough thing for me, and didn't want to make it worse. Julia's mum and Julia's sister tend to rely on her for a lot of emotional support. So when she then became the emotionally vulnerable one, or she was supporting me, it was almost like a loss for them that they were losing their emotional support. And I was like, come on, guys, could do without this. And a lot of times when we did have like miscarriages and stuff like that, it was like we would receive like 20 phone calls from like Julia's sister, and like we're just not answering the phone call because we don't want to talk about it, because we don't want to talk about a failed round of IVF or a miscarriage or something like that. But she just kept phoning and phoning and phoning, and it's mostly about her trying to solve her sort of sense of I don't really know, guilt of not being a adequately supportive sister until that point and stuff like that. But actually, she was making it a lot more difficult. So actually telling her was kind of maybe a mistake. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit cruel, but certainly it's been tough at times to have. Yeah,
I can totally relate to that. Like, it's you tell people and they respond in different ways. Like, he's talked about her dad and her brother. I automatically think in my head, as a man, maybe they didn't know what to say. It's not what we talk about, is it? It's, what do you say to another guy who's turned around and told you this? Where, her mum and her sister, I think women are more inquisitive anyway, and they want to support. And sometimes when they don't know how, that can come in quite overwhelming waves, can't it? And it can be very tricky to manage and kind of maneuver through without trying to look after yourself but not upsetting everyone else. Like you just said, you had another. It wasn't a problem, but it felt like a difficulty you had to deal with. But it's important to kind of highlight that I think it's quite a common thing. Like a lot of people feel that extra burden, like when they do tell people, and maybe the reaction is overwhelming slightly because you're juggling that raw emotion, aren't you? And there's no right or wrong way to do it. And sometimes when you actually get people that are interested or want more information, you don't even quite know how to give it to them because you haven't got much to give because it's a new experience and everything.
Julie's dad definitely repeatedly told me over and over again that they weren't having kids back 40 years ago. And he started wearing loose boxers, and then it all happened. And you're just like, this is the sort of shit I don't want to hear. This is that's the sort of comments that you can constantly get presented with, like, oh, they've got this magic bullet that you can just use and wear loose boxers, and that will sort you right out. And
if only it was that easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a good lifestyle tip to take on board, but there was
one of maybe 100. But,
one of them. Luke, how was your experience in opening up? Like, when did you first open up and kind of have those discussions with family initially?
Yes, so very much was family first. I'm lucky enough that I've got a very supportive relationship with all my family, actually, both my parents and both my sisters. The first person I told, likewise, I think, like Alistair, was my dad, and I can remember it was Boxing Day last year or Christmas Day last year, and we were people came here for lunch and just went back down to his in the car. And I think it's the whole thing about talking to teenagers, right? You do it in the car because you don't have to look them in the face. That seemed like a kind of, if you like, a sort of I don't know, maybe a manageable time, a depressured time to kind of have the conversation. So I don't know, in hindsight, maybe a little bit of a cop out to not sit down and do it kind of, man to man kind of thing. But that was, that felt a kind of safe way to have the conversation, I guess. And and then quite quickly told my parents are divorced, so quite quickly told my mum as well, and then both my sisters. One of my sisters is in France, so that had to be over a WhatsApp or Zoom call or whatever, which makes it a little bit harder, I guess, because it's like, have to sort of say, can I just fill you in and update you on a few things that are going on in my life, kind of things. That felt slightly a forced, not forced, but a slightly harder kind of conversation to have. I think, I don't know, that sort of brings me to sort of another point, I guess, around like, I've certainly found not only telling my family, but also telling other people, like trying to bring it into an existing conversation. Like, don't feel there's so much pressure that you have to like sit down and have a face-to-face, a really intense conversation. Like, as it happens, and maybe because I was doing this session this evening, I ended up sharing with one of my colleagues in a meeting today, and for me, the routine, like, it felt like I was a little bit engineered, but as I said before, the Northern Line was crap. But normally I cycle in. So I was like, well, actually, I've been getting the train in rather than cycling in because I'm going through this fertility journey, and it's been recommended to reduce how much I'm cycling. So like, that felt like a way in just to have this conversation just as part of just generally catching up with one of my colleagues today. So like, I definitely found it easier, as I said, to do with my dad on a car journey, and then to just bring it, not naturally, because it's not really a natural ton of conversation, but bring it in at a sort of sensible point, maybe with a little bit of creative license, to go from talking about getting the train in, it was a crap journey in, to male fertility, to that's why I'm reducing my cycling and that's why I'm on the train, kind of thing. But just sort of finding a routine that doesn't escalate it in your mind to kind of get to that kind of feeling like it's a big thing, a big hurdle that you have to sit down and have that conversation face to face, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense, like that, because you've got to have a conversation, or you want to have a conversation with someone, and putting that extra pressure, it does feel like you're carrying that burden of, you've got to talk about something, and then there's that extra worry of how they're going to respond, and how's the conversation going to go, and everything like that. There's there's so much research to show that sitting next to someone or walking alongside someone while talking to them, you can have much more natural flowing conversations. And I know that if Sean was on this call, he'd be talking in quite detail about that, because it's a really powerful way to actually communicate. Because as you said, that sitting in front of someone and having that formal conversation can be so hard. But actually, this evening, you've sat with someone on a train and it's kind of naturally happened, where that pressure of maybe face-to-face formal conversation wasn't there. So it's definitely, if you've got someone that you want to make a conversation with or have a conversation with, car's a perfect situation, because you're not directly looking at them.
Yeah, and for me, the kind of lesson from that is like, I found it probably harder, or it was a bigger challenge to find the right time rather than find the right words, which is the title of this. That actually was the easy bit, finding the right time and sort of feeling like you were, I don't know, engineering and slotting it in a conversation that just wouldn't normally come up.
Yeah.
But finding the right time to have that conversation, I found in hindsight probably more of a challenge than what to say or people's reactions.
I suppose the really interesting question is, what would be the right time? Because I don't think there is the perfect time, but you kind of wait for it, don't you? You think that it will come, and I think the longer you wait, the more pressure you feel. So sometimes just kind of making a decision of when you're going to do it, and maybe thinking about how you're going to do it, can really benefit both you as individuals talking about it, but the person receiving it. You know, if you're, I found I had a conversation early on with someone in my family, and they were busy. They were busy doing something, and I kind of walked in and to have a chat with them. And I realised halfway through the conversation they weren't really taking in what I was saying because they were too busy, which in itself then adds more pressure to have to go over it again. So it's
yeah, it's a middle ground, right, between the time when someone's too busy and not taking it in, and sitting down and feeling like you're in a a counsellor's chair kind of thing, somewhere in the middle where you've got enough for their attention. Like you say, on a walk or in a car is probably a good time, but it could just be, in a, when you pop around to see a friend or whatever. But yeah, like trying to, like, what's the point I'm trying to make? Trying to de-escalate in your mind the hurdle of having a conversation with someone about fertility stuff is I guess the main thing I'm trying to get to. Like, don't let that build up, as you say, Kieran. Don't let that build up in your mind to be the thing that stops you sharing, because we'll talk about it later, I'm sure. But yeah, stops you sharing where you're at, because there's so much that I've seen so many benefits.
Yeah, 100%, completely agree there. So let's talk a little bit about how you kind of approached family, and when you started to share with your family, because
when I first did we did our first IVF in 2019. You're testing me now. 2019. We just went on with it, didn't tell anyone, and then after the test and everything, I told my parents, and obviously it's negative, and told them that everything that we had gone through, and they were like sort of a bit annoyed, obviously, and eventually, after talking to people after so many attempts, I sort of opened up, and especially with family more. For years, my brothers didn't know about it till last May, so that would be 6 years we've done it without them telling them, and it was very hard to tell them, because bear in mind, my middle brother has got 2 kids, and it was very hard because their result of, we sat down on one evening and basically told them, and my oldest brother didn't do much. He just kept really quiet. And my middle brother, who's got a son and a daughter, came and cuddled me and apologized and burst into tears, and the wife just sat there just saying nothing. And I felt after spending all these years of communicating with people, it was very sad that they didn't really give a monkeys about me. And even now, after all these attempts and these frozen transfers and etc., it's still talking to a brick wall. They don't talk to me about it. They don't ask me or my wife any questions. It's quite sad. So I would love people to sort of get people talking more, and I don't want people, unfortunately, in my shoes.
Yeah, buddy, I can understand that's difficult for you. And we've talked about it previously, haven't we? When I've seen you, it's something I have learned though through all my fertility journey, Sol, is that people's reactions to you is a reflection of them, not you. You know, and I think I said that to you when we had that chat, and I can totally emphasise that it's difficult, but you keep doing what you're doing. You know, you keep looking after your wife and the family want to be involved. How about mum and dad? Like how?
They're more understanding now because we've sort of sat down with them and explained everything. And even on Lisa's side, her at the beginning, her brother and her sisters weren't really being very polite, but now I get on more with. I find this a bit awkward, but I get on more with my wife's sister who lives in London than the rest of than my brothers, which is quite sad. Like today, I went over to my sister-in-law's, and it was well, he is my nephew, my wife's nephew, first birthday tea after school because they've got two older ones, and it was nice, but I'd rather have it as mine for my son or daughter's first birthday than a nephew, if you get me.
Yeah, I completely understand that, mate. My advice for you to be is lean into family that want to be there to support you. That's the key bit of advice I'd give you, mate. It can be tricky manoeuvring it, and at some point I'll catch you and explain everything that happened in my storytelling in terms of when I let people know. But yeah, lean into those that are there for you. All right.
Just one reflection on that, and sorry, I didn't realise that you'd had such a difficult time with your family. But yeah, it's good that some of them have been more supportive. I guess I just had a bit of a reflection, building on what you were saying about like I've definitely sometimes found it hard to find the time to then just keep people updated because obviously it's such a roller coaster and it goes on over such a long period of time that I just what you were saying just now sort of reflected that like I haven't necessarily said to people like it's okay to ask or please don't ask. So I don't know. I don't have any right or wrong answers here. It's more of a kind of question about like what have people found works like to make sure that we keep that open dialogue rather than feeling that pressure to have another conversation kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're both, me and my wife, a pretty open couple. We don't keep anything in, and Kieran knows what I'm like. She'll knows like what we're like. That we're such an open couple that we go around and we're not scared of people now saying, "Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" And it's very, very awkward that people think that you can. Sorry, my landline was just going. That was probably one of my brothers. But yeah, no, we're pretty open about it, and it's just, I know we're trying to get them to talk, but they're still like mouses. They're being very quiet. So I understand what you're saying, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in hindsight, and maybe just reflecting on it now, like perhaps it would be helpful for me to say to my family and maybe friends as well, like it's fine to ask about it. Like I'll tell you if I want you to piss off, but I would probably, in hindsight, have rather would rather people had asked occasionally rather than me feeling like I needed to go to them and manufacture another time to have a conversation. I guess is my one reflection, that yes, once I'd got over the hurdle of having the first conversation, it definitely felt much easier. But I then sometimes found I had to find another time to go back and find it, an opportunity to talk to them, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's okay to ask, but people need to be prepared for the fact that it's going to be bad news in many cases. And I think
or no news, just that you're waiting for the next set of set of tests or whatever it might be.
Absolutely, yeah.
I always go on. Sorry, laughing. I always say, everyone, even my wife, even people at work, saying, "So, how's the IVF going?" So I just go, "I'm plodding along." It's a short, sweet answer. You're plodding along. You get on with it. When there's news, please God, we'll tell you.
Yeah, I think that's a great reflection, Luke, in terms of how you mirror the behaviour you want from others. So if you want to talk to others, and this is kind of naturally going on to our next topic in terms of talking to friends about it. If you reflect outgoing conversation where you're happy to talk about it, you're open about it, eventually people pick up on that's how you want to be about it. And yeah, that was kind of a really good reflection, Luke. I think it's that kind of how you are will be how people are. And
yeah, definitely that. I guess it's also like inviting, like giving them permission to ask you about it. I guess because it's a topic that's not really talked about, and yeah, I feel like I could have done more to say this is the current situation. It's always fine to ask. I'm as Saul said, it might be that there's nothing to say. But it might be that there's some significant updates, and I would find it easier, I think, if people were to ask in a gentle way rather than having to find the time, as I said.
Yeah, completely agree. So, Luke, let's talk about like friends and colleagues at work, because you spoke briefly about being on the train today and having that conversation with someone, a colleague from work. How did that unfold for you, like right at the beginning? Was it family? Obviously, you told family first, and then were there select friends that you kind of went to, or did you talk to people maybe that weren't in your friendship group to see what reactions were like? How did that unfold for you further afield?
Yeah, it's basically been, I guess, sort of concentric circles, like close family first, close friends second. I actually probably haven't told my extended family, like aunts and uncles and cousins and the like. There's probably plenty of those that don't know. But I've also said it's fine for my family to for my mum to update her brothers and sisters, kind of thing. So I've tried to give people permission to pass the news on, and it's not a kind of big secret. But yeah, I guess how far out in terms of that, like concentric circles? Yeah, friends and family first, close friends second, and there's probably, I don't know, there's probably six or eight couples, 6, 8, 10 couples, but in both my wife's and my friendship group that we've that we've told. And then I've also told my boss and a couple of kind of close colleagues at work. And again, I'm lucky enough, I guess I work for a social enterprise, so I think that tends to attract people that are a little bit more kind of understanding. We work very in the sort of in a sort of personnel, sort of HR-y kind of space anyway. So I think those people are a bit more understanding. And then the other people I've told who I guess in the next group out is I do a lot of cycling. Well, slightly less cycling now than I would like. And I've told a select group of people in the cycling club, really, because, well, I'm on the committee, I'm the club captain. I usually would ride probably 2 or 3 rides a week, 6 or 8 hours a week, and I've obviously not been. So I think it got to a stage where I felt like I was making excuses for I can't ride this weekend because I can't ride. And I only want to do a short ride this weekend. And I was sort of making excuses, so it just felt easier to tell people, to tell a few people, enough people that I was kind of mates with at the cycling club, no more than that. And there was one, the reason it came about is that we're supposed to be going on a like a weekend away, and they needed someone to drive a van, and I said I'd do it, and that sort of became the sort of trigger, if you like, for just opening up to say to people, and that's definitely, that particularly the cycling club, that felt like I was forever on eggshells and making excuses. And that's just felt much easier, to be honest, since I've told a few people. I suspect they haven't passed it on, but it's just felt much easier to tell a few people, and therefore I feel I don't need to make excuses to other people. And I think similarly, having told my boss at work, as I said, he's definitely very understanding anyway, and that's just made it easier. Like I said, I've had a couple of appointments with Jonathan Ramsey, and I've just said, look, what's going on in my life. Those are generally, appointments in the week and stuff. So he's just been fine about me making up the time and working around that kind of thing. So I think, again, it's just made it easier. I don't have to creep around quite so much and feel like I'm making excuses all the time. So that's a long way of saying it's gone out from close friends and family, wider friends, kind of colleagues and cycling, close colleagues and cycling club people. But certainly on the outer extremities of that, it's definitely just felt much, like it's just made life much smoother, apart from then the kind of emotional support which we can maybe come to. But that's the way it's gone down for me so far.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned a few things there. First of all, like having an understanding workplace makes a complete difference to the whole experience, and that is something I think we will need to cover on a completely different a panel. Too many P's in my life, but it really makes a difference. What I'd like to pick up there, Luke, is how did the cycling club react? Because there'll be a lot of guys out there that will be part of social sporting groups that, say, for example, guy plays football, plays rugby. The culture there is you finish your game, you all go and have a few beers, you have a great time, and then suddenly they're like, I can't do that, and then they know that they've got to be open and honest with their team, with their friends, but they're anxious about it. So how did the club react in terms of your close-knit friends that you ride with?
Yeah, so I've probably only told maybe half a dozen people within the club. And I guess to your point before about like leaning into the people that are supportive, I was probably quite selective about who those people were going to be. The people that I'm sort of closest to, if you can be close to someone in a sports club, but the people I'm sort of better mates with, and B, the people that I thought were going to be kind of a bit more understanding around the around the issues. But I can honestly say that all four of the ones that I can think of were super supportive. A few of them said they knew other people who'd been through the same thing. I honestly can't remember either with the cycling club people or elsewhere kind of awkward comments or people taking the piss or anything like that. So maybe that's just I happen to have been lucky, or maybe that's just the reality is like it always seems worse with some of these people than the reality, and actually people are on the whole, most people are kind of genuine, decent human beings. And on the point about the drinking, I don't know if it's a sign of the times or if it's a sign of cycling or just my club, but there's a lot of people that just don't drink anyway. Some of them for sort of athletic performance reasons, some of them for health reasons. So there are a lot of people that drink non-alcoholic beer or other things in the pub. So that was never an issue either, to be honest. So on the whole, maybe I've just been lucky, but on the whole, telling what potentially, as you say, Kieran, could have been a quite challenging group, that's been very smooth.
No, that's really good. That was so much of this, like when you get the support you need from the people that you need it at a time, it just makes it so much easier. Alistair or Sol, have you got anything else to add in terms of friendship wise?
Well,
maybe from telling family to telling friends.
Well, going back to friends, like we go out with another couple locally to bingo every couple of weeks, and we were having this discussion. We sat down and we told them about everything and etc. And then we found out one of my best friend's wives is an IVF baby. So she understood. They understood everything of our of our lives, and I call it like the story. So even now, I'm 38, and I've known him since I've been 18. And he used to live with one of my brothers, so he's basically become he's basically family. And when even now when we see them go out for bingo or see them in the street or whatever, in the shop, supermarket, they're always asking. And since I've also, I'm not sure if Alistair and you and Luke, I'm not sure if you know that that me and my wife have done a podcast with Test Him, and obviously Kieran, you know about. I'm not sure if either of you heard about it. I think I told Luke you about it when I met you. I can't remember, but when that got released and etc., the meeple were more very open about it. And also, I'm not sure if basically that my work were very understanding. And my wife she works in a nursery, which is really hard, obviously. And I work with the public and I see children every day. So once it came out, everyone, my friendship, I lost friends, but sod it, you lose friends, but you gain friends with all of you guys. You've all become my fertility friends, which is at least it's sort of long term. And the people that I don't talk to anymore, I've moved on, and some of them have just gone off with their own things. But that's what I'm saying about it.
Yeah, I think it's good to hear that you had a positive experience though, and that opening up as giving you the support that you need, and friends that are there for you have lent into that, and yeah, it's great to hear that you had a positive experience. Alistair, anything to add on the topic of friends before we're going to move on to those dreaded awkward comments?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Friends, I found a mixed bag. So some people were generally very supportive throughout and were just happy to listen. And that was, pretty much the most helpful. I had a couple of friends who had the same response, friends who don't know each other, who I told them about what was going on, and they were both surprised at my reaction to it. And they were like, but you've done nothing wrong, so why are you so upset about it? And it just seemed like a very strange reaction to me. It was like blame was really anything to do with it. That wasn't what I was worried about. I was, had this big psychological impact, but it was nothing to do with having felt like I'd done something wrong. It was a very strange reaction, I thought. And I think like the only other thing I would add is that with friends, like some of them reach a kind of empathy fatigue. Like a lot of people think that fertility is this acute problem that you're going to solve with a short, sharp dive into like IVF a couple of times and it's going to work and that's going to be the end of it and they're going to celebrate with you and that's going to be great. I found there was a few friends who were just not prepared for the fact that this is going to go on for 3, 4, 5 years, and they're fundamentally just not really there for that because they start to get sort of depressed about it as well and don't want to hear your depressing news, and that varied dramatically from friend to friend. And some people it was a surprise, and yeah, people always surprise you. Unfortunately, some people always disappoint you, but you kind of need to reach a point where you call the people from your inner circle that you need to and get the support you need. Otherwise, doesn't mean you have to lose friends altogether, but you might not get the support that you used to.
It's a really interesting discussion on its own, that, because it's something that I found out through my fertility journey. You have to sometimes, and I don't even think it was a fertility journey thing. I think it's just a growing up and developing thing in my own, like myself. Like you lose people that you don't expect to through life in terms of friendship, and that enables you to grow as an individual. So even though it might be hard at the time, if the positivity isn't there, and in some aspects it's affecting you, sometimes it's the best thing to do in terms of just move on. Don't be caught up in a friendship group or feel like you have to stay with a friendship group because they've always been your friends. Yeah, as Sol said, like you gain new friends going through this, and some of those can become your best friends. Certainly have for me. So it's a good bit of information that. So
I can imagine that in like 15 years, me and you, Kieran, for example, because I've used you also as a personal trainer, I can imagine in like 15 years' time or 10 years' time saying, "Oh, do you remember having this conversation in 2025?" And we'll be like, "God, we were young then."
Yeah, I'll have even less hair by then. But right, let's move on. Has anybody, because we all talk about those awkward comments, has anyone got anything like they'd like to share on that in terms of a bit of advice or maybe to help to deal with it? Because it can catch you off guard. And I think everyone responds differently. Like initially when I had awkward comments, I used to get really quite defensive, and I'd probably just tell them where to go, and but I think that was more of a me still processing everything. But as I went through the whole processing stages, and kind of got more comfortable with the situation, I used to actually just, like I've said a few times, I used to lean into things. So if people were going to make inappropriate comments, I would challenge them, but challenge them in a more appropriate way than swearing and getting angry. But that just shows a level of development. I'm just wondering if everyone else has had a similar situation or has a situation they would like to share, kind of their experience of those awkward comments.
Well, I'll start. Basically, we were discussing it this afternoon. I was doing some notes in it, etc. And the amount of times that me and Elisa, my wife, have heard, "Oh, just go on holiday, have some hanky panky, and you'll be fine."
Yeah.
If I could put a pound on that every time I hear that, I'll be a millionaire, but a billionaire by now, because I've heard it so many times. It just gets boring.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. And I would love to be in a fly on wall documentary of someone who said that, and then a couple of years later they go, "Oh yeah, we're in fertility. We have problems with, I don't know, varicose, or I can't produce sperm or whatever." I would love to be in that room and say when they go, and they'll be thinking, going, "Now we're in the dumps now." I'm just giving an example.
I think a lot of stuff like that is due to miseducation. Like education isn't where it needs to be. Often when people respond negatively to situations or say things like that, they're either saying it because they don't know what to say, or they're lacking the education in certain areas. Luke, Alistair, have you got anything else to add in kind of on that topic?
I think that just relax thing is definitely resonates with me. I think the amount of times I've been told anecdotes of, it's never anyone that knows anyone. It's always like, I know somebody who knows somebody who went on holiday and they just relaxed, and then it all happened. They'd have an IVF 10 times, then it just happened naturally because they went on holiday. Or wear loose boxers, or when we've had miscarriages, it's been like, "Oh well, at least you can get pregnant," and that's another one for when you have a miscarriage. Which I got chatting to a plumber about the other day. He was talking about his IVF journey, and he was saying they'd had miscarriages and they'd been told, "Oh, at least you can get pregnant," and it's just one of those constant little snippets that you hear. So I'm always determined to tell people whenever it comes up that we have had IVF, that because we did conceive naturally, I'm always determined to follow up with why, so that people don't go and tell our story as if, well, they had 7 rounds of IVF and then they conceived naturally because they just relaxed, because it was relaxing. Because I can tell you, we were not relaxed. And I'm always determined that we don't become that anecdote that people go and spread around.
It's I mean, that just relax comment is so common. And as you said, like no one's ever actually said, well, when I relaxed, like it worked. It's always a friend of a cousin. and their next door neighbour type of thing. But going back to your other comment about miscarriages, I speak very openly about mine, and it's basically if people say something like that to you in terms of, well, at least you can have children. It's like, but I don't. Like, my child died, and there's a reason for that, and I don't know the reason for that. It's like saying it's okay, what happened, and there's just a lot of miseducation, isn't there, in terms of, and people just don't know what to say.
Yeah, and I think on the miscarriages as well, like people respond differently to miscarriages, and that's completely fine. But there's definitely there's definitely a cohort of people who are kind of determined that you really get hit hard by it. They're like they sort of look at you funny if you're a bit like, well, we're just trying to look at it from a positive angle. We need to go down this road again, so we're trying not to get too carried away with it. But people are like, oh, but you should, and they almost want to see you grieving, and you're like, well, maybe I want to do this privately or not talk about it, or and I found that really funny to navigate, actually, after the miscarriages.
Yeah, it's like I said already today, it's a completely different topic we could do a whole panel on, and I expect we will again at some point. But you've said something key there. People processing in different ways. Just because I'm not outwardly grieving on something in terms of failed miscarriages or cycles, or the fact that I'm open about my fertility journey to my friends and my family, doesn't mean inside I'm not absolutely falling apart. People just handle it and display it differently. I think one of the biggest things is just being honest. Like, it's one of the hardest things to do in terms of, as you said, Alistair, earlier, like that phone call that you made to your dad. It was a phone call because you needed at the time that kind of clinical feedback in terms of someone that would give you what you needed at the time, but actually you were being honest at the same time. And when you try to cover things up or try to, especially around work, like covering up at work and things like that, it makes everything so much stressful and puts strain on so many relationships. So I guess my question is, has there ever been a time for any of you that you maybe had wished you'd been a bit more open? For me, it happened when I told my mum how we were going through fertility treatment, and my sister at the same time, and they were quite open that they didn't agree with it, and at that moment I kind of shut down and walked away. And I wished at that moment I'd been a bit more open and honest, because we didn't talk for months because I wasn't open and honest at that point. And it kind of really affected my whole relationship with my family for a long time. I don't talk about it much. But I guess, yeah. Was there any points that you felt like being open and honest benefited your relationships, or do you wish you'd been open and honest maybe with others that you weren't? Have you got anything to add to that?
I think probably more about, I wish I'd done it sooner, because I think it felt like it was quite a big pressure off. Well, I guess probably two things, and then picking up on what I said before, like it felt like there's obviously all of the millions of thoughts going around in your head, and just getting them out and sharing them with other people definitely felt like, that pressure was off a little bit. Like I was not in a great place mentally in the sort of first half of the year. But once I started to open up and share people, maybe it was, linked to kind of me, where I was at in the kind of grieving process or whatever. But yeah, definitely kind of for me, it's about sooner. And the one little thing where, there has been a step forward around sharing stuff rather than an awkward comment, is that my stepdad, he's a very typical stepdad. He would often, when we see my mum and my stepdad, he would often say to Helen, my wife, "Oh, when are you guys having kids? When are you guys having kids?" Since I told my mum, and my mum's probably had a conversation with him, those awkward comments have stopped. So like it's a little bit of a counterintuitive one to the awkward comments question. Actually telling people has resulted in stopping the awkward comments that we used to get.
Yeah, it's a bit of indirect management, isn't it?
Yeah.
Speak to mum. But I think that's perfectly, and that's a great example, isn't it? Like for yourself, that being open and honest that little bit earlier. Would have maybe stopped a few comments that, in hindsight, they didn't know. He didn't know, did he? So, but actually, as soon as they got the information, people adjust their behaviour to fit the situation.
Yeah, there was a couple of conversations I was privy to when we were going through it that I didn't really like. When I was there, and it was a couple of friends were having a conversation about a couple they'd known who'd had IVF, and they'd had a fresh transfer, which was a successful pregnancy, and then they had a frozen embryo. And none of my friends at this time knew that we were having IVF. And 2 or 3 of them were sitting around discussing how kind of grossed out they were by this frozen embryo. I was thinking, like, what is going on? Like, what is there to be grossed out about? Like, and they didn't like the idea that this child had what they described as a twin, and the twin was in the freezer. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'd be delighted if we get frozen embryos, and I hope that that's where we end up. And now I feel like I can't tell these people what we're going through and what we're hoping for because they find it off-putting in some way. I think there was another conversation as well, which was some friends of ours who are quite religious, who disapproved of her sister going through IVF, and we didn't really understand why. And it turned out that they had a complete misinterpretation of what IVF meant and what it was. I think they had this perception in their head that you create kind of 20 embryos and then you just discard like 18 or 19 of them and put one in, and that's how it works. And it wasn't really until we had a conversation with them saying, well, I think a typical sort of dream scenario for a round of IVF might be kind of 12 eggs and 10 are mature and maybe 8 fertilize, and then say 5 get to day 3, and then maybe 2 or 3 get to day 5, and then you would maybe implant 1 or 2 and then freeze 1 if you're successful. But that would be like a classically like good round of IVF. And we had that conversation with them. They were quite surprised. They had it all wrong in their heads. They thought that the 12 eggs would all definitely fertilize and definitely become that from their perspective, life at that point. And anything that's discarded after that point was, in their view, would have been akin to kind of murder. And they didn't really understand the process of IVF before passing judgment on their sister, which I thought was pretty hard. Like, I found that quite hard to listen to. And then how do we navigate our conversations with them?
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's had experience like that, but
No,
Yeah.
sorry.
Going back to what you were saying before, if I should have told people earlier and etc. Well, I don't know, I'm just gonna be straight to the point now and say my brother, who's got 2 kids, who are funny enough in Leeds, near up north, and they're basically the whole story of the IVF was my sister-in-law. We were discussing this. Is this before we even knew about that I had my varicocele? Was she went up to me and said, "So you won't be able to give me any children?" I looked at her blankly and just shrugged it off and laughed it off. Elisa, my wife, said, sort of looked at her and went, same thing. But if I had straight away told her that we had problems, would she have apologized and said that comment? We still don't know. It's all a big question mark, because now, unfortunately, she hardly talks to me. She ignores me, doesn't talk to Elisa, and it's sad that people expect to, when you've said a comment like that, she still hasn't really apologized.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm just saying, that if I had opened up earlier, it's a very difficult question to answer from on my personal side. I'm not really sure if I could answer that, because it's very hard to answer it when it wasn't my fault that I started it. I didn't choose to and none of us choose to have treatment and whatever. We don't wake up one morning and go, oh, let me have no sperm or whatever, because please God, no, I don't want anyone to have it. So,
No,
sorry, I just
no,
thinking about that.
You've answered the question that I asked, so I appreciate your answer, my friend. It's I think what we've come to the conclusion of is that even if those discussions are difficult, it's better to be open and honest as early as possible. Obviously, right at the beginning of the conversation, we're talking to Luke about how maybe you do that, but having those early conversations as honest as you possibly can be, and being maybe prepared for different responses, is one of the is probably the best thing you can do in terms of talking to family if you want to, and friends. I'm very conscious of time. We've been talking for an hour now, and it seems like it's passed very quickly because it's such an important topic. So, what I'd like to do is to close off. Is just what one thing would each of you say to a guy that wants to talk to maybe his family or friends but isn't quite ready to? Like, what bit of advice would you give him? And if it's the fact that we've all got you've all got a similar bit of advice, it shows that that's the bit of advice people need to take from this. But let's start with Sol. What would your bit of advice be to people that?
Well, when I was making my notes this afternoon, I forgot to mention it, saying that counselling is really good. Like, we've done couples counselling, and I've done it on my own. I hated it on my own. I went to this guy in northwest London, and I was bored out of my mind, and didn't connection. The connection is the most important bit about counselling. Is if you don't connect, there's no point doing it. So me and my wife, we did it, and it's amazing. But all I would say, gentlemen, out of all of this, be open and let it go. Unfortunately, it's all down to science. The whole thing is down to science, and we will get there, but it will take time. There's a customer, I'll just tell you one thing. There's a customer at my work. He had 15 attempts of IVF, and now he's got 2 sets of twins, I think, from IVF. He did it overseas. So all I'll say is open up, and it will work. So that's all I'm going to say. And thank you for this, Kieran.
It's a pleasure, Sol, and thank you for coming on. I think you're right. There are multiple ways to become a father, to become a parent, and I think as you go through the fertility process, sometimes different doors open, don't they? But there is, thank you for your words, Sol. Luke, what would your bit of advice be to someone that's wants to be a bit more open and maybe talk to friends or family?
Yeah, so a couple of super quick things. I think the first thing is literally just do it, to borrow a phrase from Nike. And picking up on what Saul said, like the sooner you do it, the easier it becomes. The less it kind of builds up into your head to be a big thing. And it reduces, in my experience, it kind of makes it just easier and less awkward to kind of engage with people. And I think the second thing is something about, like, just start small. Like, don't feel you have to tell everyone in your whole network of people everything all at the same time. It's okay just to start with your immediate close family and tell them some drip feed the information out, and I think that just makes it easier for the whole thing not to become this whole I've got to tell people. So just do it and start small would be my 2 super quick things.
No, I think that's a great bit of advice, especially in terms about starting small, because it can seem really overwhelming. It's like with any of it, from telling people to the long list of lifestyle changes you have to make, start small and just build it up. So fantastic bit of advice there, Luke. Alistair, what bit of advice would you give someone who wanted to just talk about someone else?
I'm going to deviate slightly from what the guys have said. So it's your journey and it's your news. So definitely talk if you want to, and you're ready. Like, just embrace it, own it. Like, don't be shy and don't let people bring you down about it. Like, and if they are, find somebody else to speak to. So if you do want to do that, that's great. But if you're not ready, it is okay to take some time. Just, if you're not ready to tell people, do give yourself a break. It's not an easy thing to talk about. So, don't let it become a big thing if you can avoid that. But do go easy on yourself. You don't have to speak immediately.
Yeah, it's such a tricky thing, isn't it? Because some people will want to get it done quickly, other people need that bit of time. So yeah, that is all three of you have put perfect advice out, and it's a case of doing it when you're ready. Just do it when you're ready. And if I was to blend it all, I'd say process it, do it when you're ready. But when you've made a decision, do what Luke says and do it quick. Otherwise, you'll sit on it for a while and then maybe change your mind. But don't feel like you have to do it straight away. And as I found, each cycle I went through, I changed my approach as we went through to the next cycle and next cycle. So expect it to maybe be a bit dynamic if you do get through 1, 2, 3 cycles. You don't always have to follow the same routine with everything. So
I think it's important to be aware of people's people have different environments. I'm in a good workplace now, which I'm quite comfortable. I don't talk about it much at work, but it's a good place. But I have been in previous workplaces where it's not a good environment.
Yeah,
for this sort of discussion. And I think everybody's different. Everybody's got a different environment, and some people feel the need to be a bit more careful about it than others, and that's okay. And I think it's just important to be aware of that for those who do have those more difficult workplaces.
Yeah, definitely. And sadly, it's something that's very hard to control, isn't it? And but we're doing work to kind of improve workplace awareness on it. So yeah, your environment will mold how you do things ultimately, but always try and make the right decision for you as an individual. Thank you, gents. I think it's been a fantastic discussion, slightly longer than anticipated as planned, but when you're in the mix of it and we're having such a great discussion, I'm not going to rush things. I think it's been fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. So thanks for coming on. For those that are listening now or listening to it on playback, I don't know what we'd call it on the platform in the future, please, if you're not
on demand, Kieran, we're available on demand, surely.
That's what we're going with. If you're listening to it on demand, on the Nexus Fertility platform, and you're not already, please sign up to the WhatsApp group and join the community of men there, discussing things like this every single day, helping each other through the real challenging journey. So sometimes, celebrating the wins and supporting the struggles. So please head over to nexusfertility.com if you haven't already. And in the meantime, lads, thank you so much, and I will speak to you very soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.